Hi friends, family, fans, readers of my short stories. Timothy Trimble here, the author, and I'm not in my office today. I'm at the Edmonds Community College. As you can hear, there's some events going on in the courtyard here, so you're going to hear some noises in the background, but it's a beautiful fall day here today. You can see the campus here behind me, students walking around. It's a nice environment. Why am I here? I'm a student for the next 3 quarters, taking classes and courses on web application development so that I can get my skills up on full stack web development. But that supports my writing habit for the time being. Anyway, last video I talked about outlining and how I keep a kind of an encyclopedia for my stories, my characters, backgrounds, places, things, environments, and also how I outline the scenes going into a story. This week, or this month actually, I'm going to talk a little bit about the logistics behind my writing process and when I actually sit down to write. And also what I think about when I go into writing a scene and dialogue. And I'm going to give some examples from one of my Zegan stories that I'm currently working on. So you're going to get a little bit of a sneak peek on the next Zegan story that's going to be forthcoming. Just some news. Airborne Spanish is still in progress. I've received 2/3 of the story so far. And I've gotten some feedback from one of my Spanish readers, which was actually quite good. So Nazareth, if you're watching these videos, thank you. You're doing an awesome job on translating Airborne into Spanish. There's also a translator who's working on the German edition of Airborne, and I'm waiting for some feedback on the first sample of that one. And if you know anyone that knows Portuguese, I'm looking for someone who would be willing to do a Portuguese translation of the book as well. I have a lot of fans in Brazil, of all places. And when I put a poll out as to the #1 language that people would like to see Airborne translated to, Portuguese came up. So interesting. But anyway, that's current news, what's going on there. I'm still working on Airstorm. I'm halfway through it. Got 11 more chapters to go. So still going to be a little while yet on Airstorm, but it's getting there, making progress. So this month, talking about logistics a little bit. As you know, I use an iPad for most of my writing because I can be anywhere and do my writing. I can be in the lobby at the movie theater or here in the courtyard at Edmonds Community College. Sitting at the airport terminal, anywhere I can do writing. And I use 2 software products primarily when I am writing simultaneously. The iPad has this nice capability of split screen, and I'll give a sample here. My editing, I'll punch that in so that you can see what I'm talking about. But on one side of the screen I have OneNote, which is the database document storage for keeping track of my scenes, my characters, my background, the information, all the stuff I talked about in the last video. And then on the right side of the screen I use Scrivener. Scrivener is a writing, authoring software package. It's available on Apple, iPad OS. It runs on Windows, it runs on Mac, iOS, XOS, and it just works everywhere. And the writing, the content can be stored out in the cloud. So it's a great software package for doing writing. I have a link on my website that talks about it. I also have a small review on my website that talks about Scrivener. So I am a big proponent of using that. I know a lot of people like to use Google Docs because it's out there in the cloud. They can use it anywhere. It's web-based. People use Microsoft Word for writing. Different products for different people. Whatever suits you best doesn't matter as long as you're productive in your writing process. Now, talking about sitting down and writing, it takes me a while because I normally have a full-time job, or for the next 3/4 I'm a full-time student, and so I don't always get to my writing. In fact, I haven't written in the past 2 weeks, but I will be doing some more writing starting tomorrow. So how is it I can step away for 2 weeks and just dive back into my writing? Well, thanks to the outline, thanks to having my characters and environments and everything built up in OneNote, it makes it real easy for me to dive back into the writing without sitting there and staring at the story or reading chapters ahead of time. So what I normally do is I'll read the last scene that I wrote, and then I'll look at my scene list of what the next scene is supposed to be, and then that's usually enough to get me back into the writing process. We're talking like maybe 5-10 minutes of reading, and then I'm dialed back in and I start the writing process. Now, a couple things to think about for writing, formulating your story, is putting a scene together and also putting dialogue together. So I'm going to talk first about putting a scene together. And as a writer and having readers, you don't want to provide too much information. You want to provide just enough to help the reader formulate that scene in their head. If you give them too much information, you're taking away their ability to imagine what's going on. And that's why I like reading so much, and I'm sure many of my readers, that's what they like as well, is that when you read a story, you like to be able to see in your head, in your imagination, what's going on, what the people look like, what the environment looks like, sounds possibly. So it's very important on putting a scene together, because when I read a scene from a story, I have one particular vision of that scene, what's taking place. Somebody else may read that scene and have a totally different concept or vision of what's taking place in that scene. So it's very important not to give too much details, but you also want to paint a little bit of a picture to set the tone for the scene and the environment. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to read a scene from my next Zegan story, and it's the opening scene for Zegan's story, and I'll help you. Hopefully you'll see how I've kind of put the scene together so that the reader enjoys the environment, but there's not too many details to help you imagine what's going on. So here we go. Quietly, the woman stepped toward the man leaning halfway into the rear engine compartment of the frigate. She stopped within an arm's length and watched the man move his legs as he leaned further into the opening. Sounds of metallic scraping and tapping coincided with the shifting of the man's body against the surface of the engine access hatch, like some strange rhythmic mechanics dance. Looking away from his feet up to the aft structure of the ship, she frowned at the small cracks, dents, scrapes, and marks on the structure. Regardless of where she looked, there was something to frown at. She shook her head, looked back at the man's backside, and smiled at the greasy splotches on the curves of his rump. Her smile grew when she noticed a small rip in his pants, revealing a glimpse of his white underwear. Reaching out, she stuck a finger into the opening of his pants and tickled the man's legs. That was the opening scene for the next Zegan story. So I described just enough to help the reader envision what's happening, what's going on. The back of a spaceship, the man is working on, and the woman is there behind him. I don't describe the details about his pants. I don't go into a huge amount of detail about the spaceship that he's working on, the tools he's using, types of shoes he's wearing. I don't talk about her clothing, what she's wearing, what she looks like. I leave that up to the imagination of the reader. That's very important. Reading is very personal for each and every one of us, so we want to make sure that we tell the story in a way that the reader can become involved as well. Now, talking about dialogue a little bit. The dialogue in a story needs to be realistic. If you've listened to dialogue in a movie or a television program, it's not always realistic. For example, a phone call. Usually when you hear someone talking on the phone or see somebody talking on the phone in a movie, do they ever say goodbye? No. They just hang up. They quit the conversation. How rude is that? That's not realistic. So I throw in the details on dialogue to help show the realism of what's going on in the story. So I'm going to read a little bit of dialogue piece from this Zegan story so that you can also get a sense for maybe some of the realism that takes place in the story. So here we go. It says, Zegan continued rubbing the new bump on his head while turning to face her. I didn't know you were coming. Seeing the sparkle in her eyes and the grin on her face helped to melt away the hurt. He smiled and chuckled as well. I would have set my proximity warning on. I wanted to bring you a small care package for the trip, she added while handing him a circular container with a handle on top. I'd kiss your boo-boo, but it's a little oily. Her smile turned to a frowning smirk. Well, these are still clean, he pointed to his lips. Rebecca reached in for a quick pep on the lips. Zegan leaned forward for contact. There, he added afterwards, boo-boo, all better. So, brief but accurate, and it's okay to have nuances in the dialogue as well. Maybe you have a character that uses word whiskers like or well, or maybe you even have a character who stutters a little bit. You can throw that into the dialogue as well. Maybe they have a bit of an accent. Be very careful there, because it's easier to say he spoke with a French accent rather than try to mimic in the dialogue the sounds of a French accent. So just a little tip there. Anyway, just a brief tips on writing the story, writing a scene, writing some dialogue to hopefully help you out in your writing process. A shout out today goes to babbelcube.com, BABELCUBE.com. You can see the link right here on the video. That's who I use for looking for translators for translating the story into a different language. It's a good site, good processes going on there, and they handle distribution of the translated publication as well. So I recommend you give them a look. And for school book, of course, there's my cover, and if anybody wants to look, there's the back of it. Shameless promotion, that's what I'm doing. Anyway, will there be some outtakes? Yes, I made some mistakes here, and you can watch them in the outtakes. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video this month. Thank you for watching. Feel free to post a question if you'd like to see something special in content in the future. And next video, I'm talking about characters, building a character, figuring out who the character is, and following that character throughout a story. Anyway, that's it for now. Thanks a lot for watching. See you all later. OS. iPad OS. There's an outtake I'm going to be doing. Brain gap. Bye-bye.